Hey everybody, today I have a very interesting camera to share with you. It is a Zeiss Ikon Contax D, which you would never know because when it was imported, the model was ground off of it by the customs and import people because of a trademark dispute, and we're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. The Contax D is an interchangeable lens SLR with no light meter, shutter speeds of 1 second to 1/1000th, and bulb, a Stevens style plain matte focusing screen. Honestly don't know what Stevens style means, but they seemed to make a big deal of it at the time. And a flash sync speed of a blistering 1/20th of a second. The target market for this camera was the high-end user. It's a Zeiss. It has exceptional build quality and great lenses, and it had all of the refinements available at the time. This camera predated instant return mirrors and automatic lens apertures, so all the lenses for it will be presets. But all of the refinements available to it were included. It has a slightly confusing interface by today's standards, so we're going to go over that in this video series. It was made by Zeiss Ikon in Dresden, Germany from 1952 to 1956. It was preceded by the Contax S, and it was concurrent with the Contaflexes 1, 2, and 3, the Contessa 35. But I don't know, but beyond that, I don't know Zeiss history well enough to know if all of those were made by the same entity, as there was a split between the East and West German parts of the company after the Iron Curtain was erected. And then this was followed by the Contax E. So if you have your Zeiss Ikon Contax D, we're going to go over all of the features on it. Starting on the front, as we do, are the strap lugs right here where you would connect your camera strap. This is the film rewind knob, and we have the film memo dial right here, which will help you. What you do with the film memo dial is we have ISO settings right here. And so you just line up the type of film you have with the ISO. Daylight color, tungsten color, black and white. So you just select what type of film. Let's say we have black and white 50 ISO. Just line it up like that, and that reminds you what kind of film you have. Flash PC port. This is your shutter speed selection dial right here. We'll see how to use that in the second video. Frame count dial right here. And there's a little arrow by the 0 which shows you which direction to turn it, but you have to manually reset it after you load film. And this is your film advance knob right there. This camera is so darn touchy. Oh yeah, that's right. This camera's not touchy, this camera's broken. For the purposes of this video, everything you need to know about how to use it is I can do, but I'm going to do something no one likes. There we go. But the way that the mirror works is that there's a little string that's here that when you advance the film, it's supposed to pull that string down. I think that the string is broken inside the camera, so the mirror does not return at all with this camera. So there are some things about this camera that we can see, and also the shutter on this thing is not working properly. Great cameras, but they were used extensively, and now in their old age are showing some of the wear from that extensive use. At any rate, so that's what's on the top. On the front, we have the shutter release. We have the shutter release button right here and the self timer. This is where the logo where the model would have been. This is the Zeiss Ikon logo. M42 lens mount. And also here we have the film back release, which is that lever right there. On the camera's back, we have the viewfinder window and the slow and fast shutter speed selection dial, or a selection switch right there. Also the serial number, right down here on the bottom. On the camera's bottom, we have the tripod socket, which is a 3/8 16 that generally will come with a 1/4 20 adapter, but might not. This one does. And the film rewind button. Also, we have a little little flippy dude right here. Oh, come on. There we go. That flips down so that you can set this on a table and have it rest level and not pitch forward from the weight of the lens. So that's a nice feature. I always enjoy this about old cameras, is that they were designed to be able to be sat on something like a fence post or a picnic table if you didn't have a tripod with you. Inside of the camera, which was made in Germany. Here we go. We can see a somewhat different interface than we normally see in cameras. So here's the film cassette chamber. This is where you'll put your fresh roll of film. This is the shutter curtain right here. There we go. This camera was used a lot and probably not stored properly. You can tell because there's mildew on the curtains there. Anyway, film cassette chamber, film guide rails. The guide rails sandwich up against the pressure plate to keep the film moving through it smoothly. Film tension sprocket, film take-up spool right here. And if your camera does not have a film take-up spool with it, if you have an old roll of film, this is literally just the plastic spool out of an old roll of film. It's the exact same design, so you could just grab the plastic spool out of one of those and pop it in here, and that would work okay. Film pressure plate, and that's it. And then these little guys here sandwich up against the bottom of the film cassette to help make sure that it's properly aligned. Very simple camera on the inside. So this camera was a bit of a mystery to me. When I bought it, I was told it was a console, C-O-N-S-O-L camera. But as I started researching it, I started thinking that wasn't the case. I can't remember Henry's website's name, but I will put a link in the video description if you want to check it out. At any rate, he knows way more about these cameras than I ever will. So I sent him the pictures that the seller had posted, and I asked him if I was right that it was a Contax D, and here's his response, which is, I think, comprehensive and very, very good. Hello, David. You've run smack head-on into a historical conundrum. There was a huge dispute over the ownership of the Carl Zeiss trademark after the end of World War II. Germany had been split into Soviet-Russian-controlled East Germany, where the original Zeiss factory was located in the city of Jena, but the Zeiss executives had escaped to the American-occupied West Germany and had established a legal Zeiss Foundation there. The people at the Zeiss factory in Jena and the newly formed Zeiss Foundation in the city of Oberkochen, West Germany, both claimed ownership of this valuable trademark. During the time the trademark ownership issue traveled through the various courts, both sides manufactured goods bearing the label Carl Zeiss. But the new Zeiss Foundation in the American zone had the backing of the US government. In an attempt to circumvent newly imposed import restrictions on East German-made Carl Zeiss branded products, the East Germans established a company called the Arkona Corporation in the United States. This worked for a short while, but in the end, US Customs figured out what was happening and instituted a brutal policy of grinding off the Carl Zeiss trademark, along with any other identifying information from articles made in East Germany. Your camera is obviously one of these. In the end, the United States chose the Carl Zeiss trademark as one of the prizes of war allocated to it and then awarded it to the West German Zeiss Foundation. It was at this time the East Germans stopped using the Contax name. However, they continued to manufacture the Contax D but renamed it to be the Console. The Arkona Corporation also went out of business at this time. I believe your camera is a Contax D and that it was originally labeled Contax. The reason for this is the little ZI engraved on the prism face. That's this right here. This stands for Zeiss Ikon, so your camera was produced at a time where the East Germans were still prosecuting their claim to the Carl Zeiss and Contax trademarks. Your camera passed through customs at a time much later after the issue of ownership of the Carl Zeiss trademark had been conclusively settled. The customs people would not have ground off the word console. They would only have defaced Contax. This camera passed through customs after 1951, which is when the West German Contax 2A camera was introduced for import to the USA. Sincerely, Henry. So that's why this big mark on the front of the camera right here is here. And that's why this camera is an important little historical artifact in US-Russian Cold War relations history. So some things not to do with your camera, and some things that have clearly been done with this camera by whomever used to own it. Do not store the camera with the shutter ready to fire. Always discharge it to release tension on the springs and prevent shutter damage. So when you're done using your camera for the day, just make sure to trip the shutter and you'll be good to go. Do not touch the shutter itself because that can lead to bricking. Do not leave your camera or lenses in your car because that can lead to heat damage, which can cause things like oil to get on the blades or into places they shouldn't be in the mechanism here. Don't store your camera in a plastic bag or box, as this one was probably stored at some point given the mildew which is on the shutter curtain. Also, don't let this get wet because it's not weather sealed and the internal components can rust. And just remember, your Zeiss Ikon Contax D is a precision tool and should be handled with care and respect. And as long as you take care of your camera will take care of you.